Assalamu alaikum, hope everyone is doing well. Today we'll be going over descriptive fragments, so let's get right into it. Okay, so a descriptive fragment known as mawsuf sifa is created when an ism is being described by another ism. So in English, the descriptive word, meaning the adjective, comes first, then the word being described. For example, white car. The adjective here is white, and car is the word being described. But in Arabic, it's the opposite. The word being described comes first, so car comes first, and then the adjective comes later, which is white. So there are two parts that make up a descriptive fragment: mawsuf, which is the word being described, and sifa, which is the descriptive word meaning the adjective. Now, for it to be a descriptive fragment, the two isms must match in all four properties. This means that both the mawsuf and the sifa must match in definiteness, in gender, in number, and in status. If any of them don't match, then it won't be considered a descriptive fragment. So for example, you can see here we have our two parts. Al-kitabu is going to be our mawsuf. This is the word being described. And then we have al-kabir, which is our sifa, which is the adjective. Like we said earlier, the word being described in Arabic always comes first. And both of them match in definiteness because of the al, and they both match in gender because both are masculine by default and there aren't any signs of femininity, and they're both singular, and the status of both is rafa because of the dhamma at the end here. Therefore, this is a descriptive fragment, and together this translates to the big book. Next, I just wanted to add that isms that are adjectives can usually switch from masculine to feminine by placing a fatha on the last letter and then adding a ta marbuta at the end. So if you wanted to describe a feminine object, for example a tree, and you wanted to say the big tree, you would just add a fatha on the last letter and add a ta marbuta at the end. So al-kabir becomes al-kabiratu. And now it's feminine, and now you can match it in gender with the tree, which is ash-shajaratu. So now let's take a look at a few examples. Okay, so first we have al-babil kabiri. So now we gotta check if both of these match in all four properties. So we know they're both specific because they both have an al. And we know they're both masculine because there's no sign of femininity. We know they're both singular because there's no sign of dual or plural. And we know they both are in a state of jar because they both end in kasra. So this translates to the big door. Again, the word being described comes first, and then the adjective comes later in Arabic. Okay, next we have al-ibnatani tawilatani, and we gotta check if they match in all four properties. So we know both of them are specific because they both start with an al. We know both of them are feminine because of the ta of femininity. And we know both of them are dual because of the ani ending. And we know both of them are rafa because of the ani ending. Again, if it was nasab or jar, it would have an aini ending. So this translates to the two tall daughters. Next up, we have muslimatun rashidatun. And we gotta check if these match in all four properties. So we know that they're both non-specific because they end with the tanween. We know they're both feminine because of the atun ending, the ta femininity. We know they're both plural, again, because of the atun ending. And we know they're both rafa, again, because of the atun ending. Otherwise, if it was nasab or jar, it would be a atin ending. So this translates into rightly guided female Muslims. So now the exception. Previously, when we studied pointing words, we learned that all feminine plural non-intelligent nouns, which are basically broken plurals, will be treated as singular feminine. So in descriptive fragments, this also applies to the adjective. So for example, here we have al-qalamul qadimatu, right? Let's see if they match on all four properties. So we know that they're both definite because of the al. We know that al-qadimatu is feminine because of the ta marbuta ending, and we know al-qalamu is feminine because it's a broken plural. We know both of them have the status of rafa because of the dhamma ending. But in number, because al-qalamu here is a broken plural, right? Then the sifa, which is al-qadimatu, needs to be singular feminine, which it is, and therefore this would be considered a descriptive fragment. So anytime where you have the mawsuf as a broken plural, then the sifa should be singular feminine. And this will translate to the old pens. Okay, let's take a look at another example. We have anharun wasi'atun. So we know both of them are non-specific because of the tanween ending. We know both of them are feminine because anharun is a broken plural and wasi'atun has a ta marbuta ending. And then for number, we know anharun is a broken plural again. Therefore, wasi'atun needs to be singular. And then we know both of them are rafa because of the dhamma ending. Therefore, this translates into vast rivers. Okay, next up we have الرجل الطويل القديم الكسلان. So this is an example where we have multiple sifas for one mawsuf. Again, same principle, we gotta check if all four properties match between the mawsuf and the sifa. So we know that all of them are specific because all of them have an al at the beginning. We know all of them are masculine because there's no sign of femininity. And we know they're all singular because there's no sign of dual or plural. And we know they're all in the state of rafa because of the dhamma ending. Therefore, you would translate this as the lazy, tall, old man, right? So these are your adjectives, which is the sifa, and this is your mawsuf, which is the word being described. Okay, so now long distance relationships. So in our previous three fragments that we covered, prepositional fragment, pointing fragment, and association fragment, they all consisted of two words with no other words in between, right? It was impossible to place a word in between the two components. In other words, they could not tolerate a long distance relationship. But descriptive fragments can. So you can have multiple words between a mawsuf and sifa at times. So for example, here we have qalamul mudarrisil jadidu, right? Qalamu is the mawsuf and al jadidu is the sifa because they match in all four properties. So we know al jadidu is specific because of the al, and we know qalamu is specific due to being a mudaf because qalamul mudarrisi is mudaf ilay relationship. This is the mudaf and this is the mudaf ilay. And we know they're both masculine because there's no sign of femininity. We know they're both singular because there's no sign of duality or plurality. And we know they both have the status of rafa because they both end in dhamma, right? But we have mudarrisi right here in the middle. But this doesn't take away from the fact that this is still a descriptive fragment. So you would translate this as the teacher's new pen. So now let's take a look at another example. Okay, so here we have Ibnu Imam al-Masjid al-Saghiru, right? Ibnu is going to be our mawsuf and al-Saghiru is going to be our sifa because these two match in all four properties. We know al-Saghiru is specific because of the al. We know Ibnu is specific because it has a mudaf ilayh relationship. So Ibnu is going to be our mudaf and Imami is going to be our mudaf ilayh. And we know al-Saghiru is masculine because there's no sign of femininity. Same thing with Ibnu. And we know they're both singular because there's no sign of dual or plural. And we know they're both rafa because of the dhamma at the end. So even though there's imami and al-masjidi in the middle of the mawsuf and the sifa, this is still a descriptive fragment. So here we have ibnu imami, mudaf ilay, and then imam al-masjidi, again mudaf ilay, and then ibnu as-saghiru is gonna be our mawsuf sifa. So this will translate to the small son of the masjid's imam. So in summary, what you need to know, a descriptive fragment, mawsuf sifa, is made out of two things. The mawsuf, which is the word being described, and it always comes first. And then the sifa, which is the adjective. And this needs to match in gender, number, status, and definiteness with the mawsuf. And we have the exception where this will be treated as a singular feminine when describing a non-intelligent feminine plural or a broken plural. And we should know that a descriptive fragment can tolerate long-distance relationships, and you can also have multiple sifas. And that's all for today, so I'll see you guys next time.